Have you ever looked down at your own handwriting and wondered what secrets it might be hiding? Not just the words you've written, but the way your pen moves across the page, the pressure you apply, the slant of your letters, the spaces between your thoughts made visible. Most of us see handwriting as nothing more than a practical tool, a way to get our thoughts from mind to paper. But to Carl Jung, one of the most revolutionary minds in psychology, your handwriting was far more profound than that. Jung believed that every mark you make on paper is a direct expression of your unconscious mind. The way you form your letters, the rhythm of your writing, even the way you dot your I's and cross your T's, all of it reveals something essential about who you are beneath the surface. Your handwriting, he would argue, is like a fingerprint of your psyche, carrying within it the blueprint of your deepest instincts, your hidden fears, your unspoken desires, and the archetypal forces that quietly shape your choices. Think about it for a moment. When you write, you're not consciously deciding how much pressure to apply or exactly how to curve each letter. These movements flow from somewhere deeper, somewhere automatic. Jung saw this as the unconscious speaking through the body, expressing patterns that your conscious mind might never recognize. Your handwriting becomes a window into what he called your psychological typology, the fundamental way your mind processes the world. But here's what makes this truly fascinating. Jung didn't just see handwriting as a reflection of personality. He saw it as a map of your instinctual nature, the primal drives that have guided human behavior for thousands of years. The same forces that appear in myths, dreams, and fairy tales across every culture on Earth. These archetypal energies, he believed, leave their mark not just in our dreams and fantasies, but in the very way we move our hand across a page. Consider the person who writes with bold, heavy strokes. Jung might see this as the expression of what he called the warrior archetype, someone driven by a need to assert themselves, to make their mark on the world with force and determination. Compare that to someone whose writing is light and delicate, barely pressing into the paper. This might reflect the sage archetype, a person who moves through life with careful consideration, leaving gentle traces rather than bold declarations. Your handwriting reveals not just how you see yourself, but how you instinctively respond to the world around you. Do you write quickly, as if racing to capture thoughts before they escape? Or do you write slowly, savoring each letter as it forms? Do your words march across the page in perfect lines, or do they drift and wander like a river finding its path? Each of these patterns tells a story about the deeper currents of your mind. Jung understood that we are not just thinking beings, but feeling, sensing, intuiting creatures driven by forces we rarely examine, and nowhere is this more visible than in the unconscious movements of our hand as we write. The speed, the pressure, the size of your letters, the way you connect them or leave them separate. All of these choices happen below the threshold of awareness, guided by the same instinctual patterns that have shaped human behavior since the beginning of time. What's remarkable is how consistent your handwriting patterns remain, even when you're not paying attention. You might be tired, distracted, or emotional, but your fundamental writing style persists. Jung would say this is because it's not really a style at all. It's an expression of your psychological DNA, the deep structure of who you are. But handwriting analysis through Jung's lens goes far beyond simple personality traits. It reveals something much more profound: your relationship with your own unconscious mind. Some people write in a way that suggests they're at war with themselves. Harsh angles, erratic spacing, letters that seem to fight against each other on the page. Others write with a fluid grace that suggests harmony between their conscious intentions and their deeper nature. The truly fascinating part is that Jung believed you could actually change your relationship with your unconscious by paying attention to these patterns. When you become aware of what your handwriting reveals about your instinctual nature, you gain the power to work with these forces rather than being unconsciously driven by them. You begin to see the archetypal energies at play in your life, and that awareness becomes the first step toward what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming your most authentic, integrated self. Your handwriting doesn't just reflect who you are, it reveals who you're becoming. The subtle changes in your script over time tell the story of your psychological evolution. The letters that once leaned heavily to the right might gradually straighten as you become more centered. The writing that once pressed deeply into the paper might lighten as you learn to move through life with less force and more flow. Jung was particularly interested in what he called the shadow, those parts of ourselves we've rejected or hidden away. And remarkably, the shadow often appears in our handwriting. You might notice certain letters that you form differently from the others, or moments when your usually controlled script becomes wild and unpredictable. These anomalies aren't mistakes. They're glimpses of the parts of yourself you haven't fully integrated. The pressure you apply when writing can reveal your relationship with power and control. Heavy pressure might suggest someone who needs to make a strong impact, who fears being overlooked or dismissed. Light pressure could indicate a person who moves through the world with a gentle touch, perhaps sometimes struggling to assert themselves when necessary. But Jung would remind us that neither approach is right or wrong. They're simply different expressions of the human experience. The size of your handwriting speaks to how you relate to the world around you. Large writing might reflect someone who sees themselves as significant, who naturally takes up space and expects to be noticed. Small writing could suggest a person who prefers to observe rather than be observed, who finds meaning in details rather than grand gestures. Again, Jung wouldn't judge these tendencies, but would see them as different ways of navigating the complex dance between self and world. Even the slant of your writing carries psychological weight. Letters that lean forward might reflect someone who is future-oriented, always reaching toward what's next. Vertical writing could suggest a person who lives in the present moment, balanced and centered. Letters that lean backward might indicate someone who is connected to the past, who draws strength from tradition and memory. But perhaps most intriguing of all is how your handwriting changes when you're writing about different topics or to different people. Jung would see these variations as evidence of what he called the many selves within us, the different archetypal energies that come forward depending on the situation. Your handwriting to a lover might be softer and more flowing than your handwriting in a business memo. Your script when writing about something you're passionate about might be more animated than when you're simply taking notes. These aren't inconsistencies, they're revelations. They show how different aspects of your psyche express themselves through the simple act of putting pen to paper. And by paying attention to these patterns, you begin to understand the complex symphony of forces that make you who you are. What makes Jung's approach to handwriting analysis so powerful is that it's not about categorizing people into neat little boxes. It's about recognizing the dynamic, ever-changing nature of the human psyche and how it expresses itself through our most basic actions. Your handwriting is a living document of your inner life, constantly evolving as you grow and change. In the sections ahead, we'll explore exactly how to read these subtle signals in your own handwriting and what they reveal about the archetypal forces shaping your life. We'll discover how the way you cross your T's might reflect your relationship with authority, how the loops in your letters reveal your emotional nature, and how the rhythm of your writing exposes your deepest instincts about time, space, and your place in the world. The way you cross your T's might seem like the smallest detail imaginable, but to Jung, it was a window into how you relate to authority and personal power. A T crossed high above the stem suggests someone who sets ambitious goals, who reaches beyond the ordinary. These are the dreamers and visionaries, driven by what Jung might call the hero archetype, always seeking to transcend their current circumstances. But a T crossed low on the stem tells a different story. This reflects someone more grounded, more practical, someone who prefers achievable goals to impossible dreams. And then there are those who cross their T's with unusual force, pressing so hard the pen almost tears through the paper. Jung would see this as the shadow of perfectionism emerging, a person who may struggle with an inner critic that demands flawless execution. The force isn't just about crossing a letter. It's about the unconscious need to control, to dominate, to leave no room for error or weakness. But what about those whose T's remain uncrossed entirely? This isn't carelessness, it's revelation. The uncrossed T often appears in the handwriting of those who resist completion, who prefer to leave things open-ended. Jung might recognize this as the eternal child archetype, the part of us that wants to keep all possibilities alive rather than committing to any single path. Your loops tell an even deeper story. The way you form the loops in letters like G, UI, and J reveals what Jung called your feeling function, how you process and express emotion. Large flowing loops suggest someone with a rich emotional life, someone who feels deeply and isn't afraid to show it. These are often the natural empaths, the ones who absorb the emotions of everyone around them. Their handwriting flows like water, following the natural currents of feeling. Tight, compressed loops tell a different tale. Here we might see someone who has learned to contain their emotions, perhaps out of necessity or survival. Jung would recognize this as a defensive pattern, not coldness, but protection. The small loops aren't a lack of feeling, but a careful guarding of feeling. Born from experiences that taught them emotional expression, could be dangerous. Some people write with no loops at all, forming letters like sharp angles and straight lines. This reflects what Jung called the thinking function in dominance, a mind that prefers logic to emotion, clarity to ambiguity. These individuals often excel at cutting through confusion and getting to the heart of matters, but they may struggle to access their deeper emotional wisdom. The spacing between your words reveals something profound about your relationship with others and with solitude. Wide spaces suggest someone who needs room to breathe, who values independence, and may feel overwhelmed by too much closeness. Jung might see this as the hermit archetype expressing itself, the wise one who retreats to find truth in solitude. These are the people who recharge alone and think best when they have space to reflect. Narrow spacing between words tells a different story entirely. This reflects someone who craves connection, who thinks out loud, who processes life through relationship with others. The cramped spacing isn't about being needy. It's about recognizing that meaning emerges through contact, through the friction and flow of human interaction. But perhaps most revealing of all is what happens to your handwriting when you're under stress. Jung believed that pressure strips away our personas, the masks we wear in social situations, and reveals our authentic nature. When you're tired, anxious, or overwhelmed, does your usually controlled handwriting become wild and erratic? This might suggest that beneath your composed exterior lives a more passionate, impulsive nature that you've learned to contain. Or does your handwriting become even more rigid and controlled under pressure? This could reflect someone whose natural response to chaos is to impose order, to tighten their grip rather than let go. Jung would see this as the shadow of the ruler archetype, the part of us that believes control equals safety. The rhythm of your writing, the speed at which you move across the page, reveals your relationship with time itself. Fast writers often live in the future, their minds racing ahead to what's next. They're the innovators and entrepreneurs, driven by possibility and potential. But this speed can also reflect anxiety, an unconscious fear that if they slow down, something important might be lost. Slow writers inhabit a different temporal reality. They savor each moment, each letter, each thought as it forms. Jung might see this as the sage archetype expressing itself, the deep thinker who understands that wisdom can't be rushed. But slow writing can also reflect hesitation, a fear of making mistakes, or a perfectionism that paralyzes forward movement. What's truly fascinating is how your handwriting changes when you write different types of content. Notice how differently you might write when journaling about your deepest fears versus when making a grocery list. Jung would say these variations reveal the different archetypal energies within you. The vulnerable, searching quality of your personal writing might reflect your inner child or wounded healer. The crisp efficiency of your task-oriented writing might show your inner executive or warrior. Even the margins you leave, or don't leave, on a page carry psychological weight. Wide left margins suggest someone who respects the past, but isn't imprisoned by it. They honor tradition while making space for new possibilities. Narrow left margins might reflect someone eager to move forward, perhaps even running from their history. Right margins tell their own story. Wide right margins suggest caution about the future, a tendency to hold back rather than rush ahead. Narrow right margins reflect someone who embraces what's coming, who fills every available space with possibility and potential. The baseline of your writing, whether your words march across the page in straight lines or drift up and down like waves, reveals your emotional stability and your relationship with structure. A consistently straight baseline suggests someone who has found their center, who maintains equilibrium even when life becomes chaotic. But rigid straightness can also reflect over-control, a fear of letting natural rhythms emerge. Words that drift upward as they cross the page often belong to optimists, people whose natural tendency is to rise above circumstances. Jung might see this as the expression of hope, the archetypal energy that keeps us moving forward even in darkness. But upward slanting can also reflect manic energy, an unconscious attempt to escape from present reality. Downward slanting reveals a different psychological landscape. Perhaps someone who has been worn down by life's difficulties, whose natural optimism has been tested. But Jung would remind us that this isn't necessarily negative. Sometimes the downward movement reflects wisdom, a grounding in reality that comes from having faced life's shadows honestly. Your signature deserves special attention because it represents how you want to be seen by the world, your public persona. Compare your signature to your regular handwriting. Are they dramatically different? This might suggest a significant gap between your authentic self and the image you present to others. Jung would see this as evidence of an underdeveloped relationship between your ego and your deeper nature. But when signature and regular handwriting flow together harmoniously, it suggests integration, someone who has found a way to be authentically themselves in both private and public spheres. This is what Jung called individuation in action, the rare achievement of psychological wholeness. The pressure patterns in your writing tell stories about your energy and vitality. Consistent pressure suggests steady energy, someone who approaches life with reliable force. But variations in pressure can be even more revealing. Words that suddenly press deeper into the paper might indicate topics or emotions that carry special weight for you. Light patches might reflect areas where you feel uncertain or uncommitted. As we begin to see, your handwriting is far more than a simple record of your thoughts. It's a complex psychological document, a real-time recording of your unconscious mind in action. Every curve, every angle, every space and loop carries information about the archetypal forces shaping your inner life. What emerges from this deep dive into handwriting analysis is something Jung would have found profoundly meaningful. The recognition that we are not isolated individuals, but part of a vast, interconnected web of human experience. The archetypal patterns that appear in your handwriting are the same ones that have guided humanity for millennia. The same forces that created our myths, our religions, our deepest stories about what it means to be human. But Jung's approach to handwriting goes beyond mere analysis. It becomes a tool for transformation. When you begin to see these patterns in your own writing, you're not just learning about yourself. You're awakening to the possibility of conscious evolution. You can begin to work with these archetypal energies rather than being unconsciously driven by them. Consider the person whose handwriting reveals a dominant warrior archetype, all sharp angles and heavy pressure. Once they recognize this pattern, they can ask themselves, is this energy serving me, or am I trapped by it? Am I using my natural assertiveness to protect what matters, or am I attacking what threatens my ego? The awareness creates choice, and choice creates freedom. Or take someone whose writing flows with the gentle curves of the caregiver archetype. Recognition of this pattern might lead them to examine whether their nurturing nature is genuine gift-giving or unconscious self-sacrifice. Are they caring for others from a place of strength, or are they abandoning themselves to avoid conflict? This is where Jung's concept of the shadow becomes particularly relevant in handwriting analysis. The shadow consists of all the parts of ourselves we've rejected, denied, or pushed away. But these rejected aspects don't disappear. They continue to influence us from the unconscious. And remarkably, they often show up in our handwriting in subtle but revealing ways. You might notice that certain words seem to be written in a different style from the rest of your text. These anomalies aren't random. They're moments when your shadow energy breaks through your conscious control. The word anger might suddenly appear with sharper angles than usual, revealing suppressed rage. The word love might flow with unexpected softness, showing a tenderness you rarely allow yourself to express. Jung believed that integrating the shadow, making peace with these rejected parts of ourselves, was essential for psychological wholeness. And handwriting can become a powerful tool in this process. By paying attention to these moments when your usual style shifts or breaks down, you can begin to identify what aspects of yourself you've been avoiding. The beauty of this approach is that it requires no special training or expensive analysis. Your handwriting is always available to you, constantly providing feedback about your inner state and your unconscious patterns. It becomes a form of self-therapy, a way to maintain ongoing dialogue with your deeper nature. But perhaps most importantly, Jung would remind us that the goal isn't to judge these patterns or try to change them into something better. The goal is integration and acceptance. Your handwriting reflects your unique psychological fingerprint, the particular combination of archetypal energies that makes you who you are. There is no ideal handwriting style, just as there is no ideal personality type. The person who writes with wild, chaotic energy brings something different to the world than the person who writes with careful precision. The one who presses hard into the paper offers something different than the one who barely touches the surface. Jung's vision was of a world where each person could fully embody their authentic nature while remaining conscious of their impact on others. This consciousness is what transforms handwriting analysis from mere curiosity into profound self-knowledge. When you understand the archetypal forces flowing through your pen, you begin to see how these same forces shape every aspect of your life. The way you approach relationships, career decisions, creative projects, even how you navigate conflict, all of it connects back to these fundamental patterns. Your handwriting becomes a daily reminder of who you are beneath all the roles you play and masks you wear. It's a touchstone of authenticity in a world that often demands conformity. And in those moments when you feel lost or confused about your direction in life, you can return to the simple act of writing and rediscover the consistent thread of your true nature running through every letter. Jung understood that the journey toward psychological wholeness is never complete. We continue evolving throughout our lives, integrating new experiences and developing previously dormant aspects of our personality. And your handwriting evolves with you, providing an ongoing record of this inner transformation. The letters you formed as a child carry different energy than the ones you create today. The handwriting of your teenage years might reveal struggles with identity and authority that have since resolved. The way you write now reflects not just who you are, but who you've become through facing life's challenges and embracing its gifts. This is why Jung would encourage you to save samples of your handwriting from different periods of your life, not as a museum of who you used to be, but as a map of your psychological journey. You can trace the evolution of your relationship with authority by watching how your T-crosses changed over time. You can see your growing emotional maturity in the development of your loops and curves. Most powerfully, you can witness moments of breakthrough and integration, times when conflicting aspects of your personality found harmony, reflected in handwriting that suddenly flows with new grace and consistency. These are the moments Jung called individuation breakthroughs, when we successfully integrate previously split-off parts of ourselves. As we reach the end of this exploration, remember that your handwriting is not a fixed destiny, but a living document of your ongoing becoming. Every time you pick up a pen, you have the opportunity to express your authentic nature more fully. You can write with consciousness, aware of the archetypal energies flowing through you, using them as allies rather than being unconsciously driven by them. Jung's gift to us was the recognition that we are not separate from the great forces that have shaped human experience throughout history. The same energies that created heroes and villains, lovers and warriors, sages and fools in ancient myths are alive within each of us, and they leave their signature literally in every word we write. Your handwriting doesn't just say something about your personality. It reveals your connection to the timeless patterns that make us human. It shows how the ancient archetypes are expressing themselves uniquely through you, in this moment, on this page. And in recognizing these forces, you step into conscious participation with the great mystery of becoming who you were always meant to be. The next time you write anything, a note, a letter, a journal entry, remember that you're not just recording thoughts. You're creating a psychological document, a window into your soul, a conversation with the deepest parts of yourself. Let your hand move naturally, without trying to control or perfect. And then look at what you've created with new eyes, seeing not just words, but the signature of your unique place in the great human story. This is Jung's ultimate invitation, to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, to find profound meaning in simple acts, and to recognize that every moment offers an opportunity to know yourself more deeply. Your handwriting is just one doorway into this self-knowledge, but it's a doorway that's always available, always honest, always ready to show you something new about the magnificent complexity of your inner world.